Okay, let's jump right into the source material you pulled together for us today.
Sounds good.
We're starting with this really striking image described in the documents. Tanks. Tanks rolling down Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, quite a scene. And that's the focus for our deep dive today, this grand military parade held right there in the Capitol.
So looking at the material you shared, what's interesting is how it frames the reason for this. It wasn't spontaneous, right?
Not according to these sources, no. They point out this was something President Donald Trump had apparently wanted for, well, quite some time.
Stemming from that visit to Paris in 2017. I remember reading about that.
Exactly. The sources say he was inspired by seeing a similar display there. And the documents note this event finally happened when it was sort of folded into the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary celebrations.
Okay, so it became part of that larger commemoration. And the spectacle itself, the material paints a picture of something pretty significant.
Oh, definitely. The sources get into the scale. They mention more than 6,000 soldiers taking part.
6,000. Wow. And the hardware?
Yeah, 128 vehicles that the sources identify as tanks, specifically, plus a formal 21-gun salute.
And all happening right there on Constitution Avenue. Very visible.
Very visible, easily seen from near the White House, the sources say. Even with, a bit of light rain and clouds that day, it gives a very specific image.
A large-scale, very public demonstration.
Yeah.
But then, this is where the material you've got presents a really sharp contrast.
Right. This is crucial. While all that military hardware was on display, the sources you shared also highlight simultaneous protests happening.
Protests around the country, specifically in reaction to this parade.
That's what the documents state, and they note the kind of language used by protesters, words like dictator and would-be king directed at the president.
Strong language. The sources also mention, almost like a footnote, that the parade coincided with President Trump's 79th birthday.
Yeah, that detail is included in the material as well. Adds another layer, perhaps.
So just to be clear for everyone listening, our goal here isn't to judge, but to simply unpack what these specific documents lay out.
Exactly. We're looking at the reported motivation, the sheer scale described, the setting.
And then this stark juxtaposition the sources themselves present, the massive military display happening alongside these protests using that very pointed language. It's all about understanding the event as it's presented here.
And if you step back and just look at what's in this source material, you have this huge military event on one hand, and on the other you have this specific protest language the sources recorded, dictator would be king. It really forces you, the listener, to think about interpretation.
How the same event, the same symbols of national power can be viewed through such radically different lenses.
Right.
Based purely on the narrative provided in these sources.
Precisely. The same actions prompting completely opposing descriptions within the material itself.
It's a fascinating tension right there in the documents you've shared. So maybe the thing to consider as you process this information, what does this specific event as described in these sources, this big military show meeting this kind of charged protest language, what does that contrast highlight for you about how power and leadership are seen or can be seen differently?
That's the core question the material leaves you with, I think. That tension between the display of might and the interpretation of it as potentially authoritarian, all contained within the same account. Definitely something to mull over.